This is not your father's Star Wars.
So very true. Welcome to episode 240 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 240. I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the ups and downs, the good and the bad, and the nerd and the murd. I know this was in the past quite a bit because you all know that we're like 10 weeks ahead, something like that, generally when we record these. But I got interviewed on a show called Think About It with Adam Fink, who is the author of Dreams Nightmare, which is a 2-book series. I have it on my list to read for 2026. I've got to know him through my author site. But it was a really fun interview. Plug the book, plug the podcast.
Thank you.
Yes, and Adam is listening now. He was sending me some comments the other day when he was listening to the show. And it's funny. He said he was doing some housework, and he had it playing, and his wife heard me and said, "Is that Jeff Goldblum?" That was fun.
Oh well. You know, when I think about it, yeah,
maybe
it's similar. Yeah,
maybe a little bit. Dreams Nightmare. It's a post-apocalyptic 2-book series. Really interesting premise from what I've read of the synopsis of it. So again, it's on my list for 2026. I met Adam through an author site I founded, and he is starting up a book club, which I think is really cool. And he's taking the books of the people who are part of this site. I started this, so let me back up. I was in a whole bunch of different author groups on Facebook, and so many of them have gotten very toxic. You know, they're all supposed to be these author support groups, and my personal feeling on it is I don't care how you wrote your book. If you wrote your book from scratch, start to finish, you had a professional editor, you had a publisher who contacted you and was all over your book, great.
Good for you.
But if you needed help, you needed someone else to help you, you had a ghostwriter, or you used AI to help you out with the book and editing, and you contracted through a publisher, all that kind of stuff, or you published on your own, great. I think it's awesome. My personal opinion is no matter how you get the story to the world, get the story to the world.
Yeah. AI is not writing the story. It can't.
No, it can't.
It really can't. It's not artificial intelligence.
No,
not really.
No, you do have to tell it what to write. You do, you know, and if you're smart, you're editing through there as well. But AI doesn't have the ability to give heart behind the stories and emotion. And that's what someone does. But a lot of these groups are saying, "Oh, you're not real authors." And I even saw one that said, you should put a sticker on your book that says, "I'm a piece of shit and I don't know how to write." And those kind of things, I was tired of seeing, because again, I think it's important if somebody has a story to tell it, get it out there, get it out of your head. So I started Author Support Sanctuary on Facebook, and I absolutely positively will not allow toxic behavior and toxic comments.
You won't allow people to talk shit about their own books.
No,
I thought that was really sweet. I thought that was really sweet.
But we've grown. I started this on November 9th, and today we're just before New Year's Eve. We're just a couple of days before New Year's Eve.
December 28th.
Since
we record
November,
on Sundays, kids.
Yeah. Since November 9th, we've grown that site to 300 members.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredible. The word's getting out, and people are loving it. The positive support that's there. You know, I try to catch scammers and get them off there as well. But anyway, so
I'm
Adam,
a member.
You are a member, yes. So Adam on that who I met through that site, he started up a book club, and he basically he created I don't know if he did a PowerPoint or used AI or something, but he made a little spinning wheel, and he picked several books that people have posted so far, and he made a spinning wheel, and where it landed, that's our first book we're going to review. And so I'm in the process of reading that one now. I'll give more information as we get that, but I think that's really, really cool, and it's a great way to help other authors. So any of you out there that are author wannabes, you're budding authors, you want to get your story out there, just get it out there, no matter what, no matter what. It's like our podcast. We just want to talk to the world, and talk our stupid shit and hope people enjoyed it.
Yes.
It's the same thing when I write a book. I want people to enjoy it. So
on a shoestring, we did this on a shoestring, and honestly, our stuff sounds good. I'm not gonna lie.
I think so. I don't have any problems with it. So
nope.
Anyway, that's my plug for Adam. Think about it. Again, that's his podcast. A lot of fun. We talked a couple of or a few subjects. We talked about books that should have movie or TV adaptations. Books where the movie adaptation was not as good as the book, and then book series that you hated, and we talked about those, and it was a lot of fun. So thanks, Adam. Thanks for being a listener as well, and thanks for helping out on the site. We just finished the new Percy Jackson. I enjoyed that a lot. It gives so much more than the movie did. I like the original movie. I don't have a problem with the original movie, but this really expanded it, and I really liked it. I liked all the people in it. I thought it was really cool. So if you haven't checked out Percy Jackson, it's on Disney. The second season just dropped. So it's on its way out week to week, and I can't wait to watch the second season of that.
Yeah, the kids are excited about Percy Jackson. They were all big fans of the books.
You haven't watched it yet?
Nope.
Oh yeah, definitely give it a watch. Each episode, I think, is just over a half hour, maybe 40 minutes for some of them.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah.
No, not at all. They're quick episodes, and a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I enjoyed it immensely. Some really good actors in it. Yeah.
The Percy Jackson book right here. Well, I don't know if you can see it.
No,
it's right above my head.
I haven't ever read the books. The movie was my first introduction.
It was something the kids were all into. They were just that and Severus Heap. Yeah, big on that too.
And books are great. Books are great. I love books. But something else I talked about on Facebook. One of the reasons I write, and for Percy Jackson, this is a definite as well. At least the movie. I love when there's a story that you just have to tell people you have to see this. That I think is so important for any creator of any story, is when somebody somewhere tells somebody else, man, you have to read this. You got to
read this.
Yeah.
I cannot do it justice. You need to read it.
Yeah. Those are really good. And they do that with this. So that's all I got. You got anything else? Or are you ready to step over to the nerdery side of the house?
I'm kind of ready to nerd out on this one a wee bit.
Groove us. Let's do it.
Sweet. Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Awesome.
It is a 2016 American epic space opera film directed by Gareth Edwards and written by Chris Weitz and Tony Gilroy, produced by Lucasfilms and distributed by Walt Disney Studio Motion Pictures. It is the first Star Wars anthology film and a prequel to Star Wars: A New Hope, which was released in 1977. It stars Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Ben Mendelsohn, Donnie Yen, Mads Mikkelsen, Alan Tudyk, Riz Ahmed, Jiang Wen, and Forrest Whitaker. Set a week before the events of Star Wars or A New Hope, Rogue One follows rebels who steal the schematics of the Galactic Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star. It details the Rebel Alliance's first effective victory against the Empire, as referenced in the Star Wars opening crawl. So, okay, I'm going to keep... My notes all say Star Wars, 1977. When that movie was first released, it was just called Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. It was retroactively called A New Hope.
Right, which is what the title is on the screen crawl at the beginning.
Yeah, is A New Hope. So it was kind of there, but George Lucas honestly didn't think he'd make more than one of these. He figured it'd be because he was trying to do like a Flash Gordon thing, but he couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon because somebody else was making it. So he took Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Temple and Flash Gordon and kind of jammed them all together and threw in a whole bunch of like dog fights from World War II movies and everything else, and it just made this love fest.
Well, and another reason he didn't think he would have more than one, he had a hard time getting this out in the first place. He had multiple studios that turned him down that said, no way, no way.
Well, his first science fiction film was a huge flop. It almost bankrupted
THX 1138.
Yeah, it almost bankrupted American Zoetrope.
Yeah.
Which was his friend Francis Ford Coppola's production company, whom he worked for. Matter of fact, he had to work on Apocalypse Now to basically pay him back. But yeah, his next film, American Graffiti, which he made for almost no money, was huge and big, and it spawned off a whole bunch of television series, i.e. Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, all that stuff. All those people were in American Graffiti. They were different characters, but same thing. So Alan Ladd was like, hey, I'm interested in whatever you want to do. And he was like, I want to do the space thing. And Alan Ladd Jr., who was running 20th Century Fox at the time, was like, yeah, it's fine, but we don't really have, because they were in trouble. We don't really have the money to bounce it out. Tell you what, why don't you retain most of the licensing rights? You make it yourself and we'll put it out. And Lucas was like, fine. And so he secured the financing himself and got it made. And it saved 20th Century Fox, and Alan Ladd Jr. Went on to make his own company, the Ladd Company, which made some of the best science fiction films of the 1980s. They were associated with a lot of really great stuff. Anyway, sorry, I derailed. That's kind of some of the backstory.
It's important to talk about that. I mean, granted, I think we'll probably expand on this more when we get to A New Hope. Yeah. But I do think that's important, because just to know where Star Wars started, because again, the motion picture studios most of them turned him down. He finally wound at 20th Century Fox, and 20th Century Fox said, "We'll put our name on it and we'll help market it, but you cover everything else." We only want what do they say? 10% of the,
I think that's what
profits?
It was. 10%. Yeah.
Oh 10%. My God.
Yeah.
20th Century Fox kicks themselves in the ass to this day. Yes.
It saves that 10% saved 20th Century Fox, because that movie was huge. Yeah. And when I say huge, so let's borrow the Podback machine for a second. Back in the 70s, if a movie did really well, it just stayed at the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Star Wars in some markets, in some theaters, was on the bill of the theater for a year.
Yeah.
At least 6 months. I know my local drive-in showed it at least once a month for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Like well into 79. Of course, they were a two-screen drive-in, so it'd be Star Wars and something else. And oh my God. Hell, the Ridgely, which only had one screen, showed it for 3 or 4 months, because I saw it at the Ridgely twice. And that was another thing. People went and saw Star Wars, and they went back and saw it again, because it was just so visually stunning compared to everything else they'd seen. Now, keep in mind, science fiction on television, although this is science fantasy, it's space opera, it's not really science fiction. But science fiction in films was one of two things. It was either very, very highbrow European or experimental cinema, and those were rare. I'm thinking 2001: A Space Odyssey and some
Hmm.
of the stuff coming out of Europe. So a lot of people didn't see it, or a lot of people in regular Middle America didn't go see that. They might have caught it at an art house, maybe if they were interested, but you had to go find it. Or it was a children's. It was aimed at children. They threw it out there. It was out for 2 or 3 weeks in the summer, and then they did another one the next year. That's what science fiction was in 1976. So you were either these highbrow auteur things or these, kiddie fare. There was no in between. Um, George Lucas made this movie to be kiddie fare. Keep in mind, the last science fiction film he made, THX 1138, was one of those other science fiction, one of those highbrow science fiction films. The auteur intelligentsia, basically like a novel on a screen. That's what THX 1138 was. And honestly, I urge you guys to go and see it because it is a beautiful piece of work, but it is kind of heady. It's not. It's more of the 2001: A Space Odyssey vein. So if you like that, you should check out THX 1138. And for a long time, you couldn't see it, and then after Star Wars did really well, they released it on video, and now it's. I had a I had a copy of it that was in clamshell for years.
But I think we've given enough preview to Star Wars. We're on Rogue One.
We are on Rogue One. Okay, so John Knoll, who served as the visual effects supervisor of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, pitched Rogue One's story as an episode of the unproduced television series Star Wars Underworld in 2003. They were trying to produce a series that took place on Coruscant that dealt with the underworld. It never went anywhere. He pitched it again at the film as a film following Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilms in 2012. Edwards was hired to direct in 2014. Edwards sought to differentiate Rogue One from previous Star Wars films and approach it as a war film, omitting the opening crawl and transition screen wipes used in the main Skywalker saga installments. Principal photography began at Pinewood Studios, Buckinghamshire, in early 2015 and wrapped in February of 2016. The film went through extensive reshoots in mid-2016. The score was composed by Michael Giacchino rather than the Skywalker Saga composer John Williams, with an estimated production budget of $200 to $280.2 million. I don't know why there's such a. It's between this and this. That's a big jump. Rogue One is one of the most expensive films ever made.
Michael Giacchino, if that's how he's pronounced anyway.
Yeah.
He is also the composer that did the Star Trek reboot.
Yes. Yeah. And
he's really good.
He is really good, and it gives it a different tone. Mm-hmm. Nothing against John Williams, but no, in my opinion, this film needed it.
Because it is a very different tone. It's very different than the rest of Star Wars. And you're right. It's a war film. Because it's all about the group of rebels that stole the plans for the Death Star.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell right there.
And not all of the rebels are together at this point.
Right.
Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, premiered in Los Angeles on December 10th, 2016, and was theatrically released in the United States on December 16th. I'm sorry. It premiered in Los Angeles on December 10th. It was premiered everywhere else on December 16th. It received positive reviews with praise for its acting, story, visuals, musical score, cinematography, and darker tone than previous Star Wars films. But criticism for its pacing and digital recreation of Carrie Fisher and the deceased actor Peter Cushing. Rogue One grossed $1 billion worldwide, becoming the second highest grossing film of 2016.
And this was this was really kind of the first one of its type that dove into CGI actors in a movie. And so it wasn't perfect.
No.
Princess Leia does look pretty fake. Peter Cushing does look pretty fake. But I think for the time and for the first stab at this, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, they needed they needed they needed Carrie Fisher. I don't necessarily think they necessarily needed Peter Cushing. I think they could have cast someone to look like him
Hmm.
and maybe done that a little bit, which they did. That guy actually does look a lot like Peter Cushing. They could have just put some makeup on him.
Right.
But that's not the way they decided to go. And agree. I don't necessarily agree with all of it. But that's what they did. And it comes off pretty well. I agree. Um, it does not distract from the rest of the film.
No, not at
And
all.
and this movie, honestly, I think this is the best Star Wars movie.
I think it's outstanding. I still will never say it's the best because to for me, you have to beat The Empire Strikes Back. It's always where it's going to be for me. You have to beat that. Rogue One comes close. It comes close. It was very, 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 very good. And I think, and so at my house, people talk all the time, what's your Christmas tradition, and people throw out, all the different Christmas movies, including Die Hard, which is a Christmas movie.
Yes.
But so is Lethal Weapon.
Yes.
Um, but people say, what's your holiday movie? In our house, it's Star Wars.
It's Star Wars.
We watch a Star Wars marathon as soon as we have breakfast made, we turn on Star Wars and it just plays all day long. We might
Uh-huh.
be doing different things around the house, but
Yep.
it is playing. So I was just thinking about this weekend, or this past week as I was watching A New Hope because of Rogue One, and I know there's people out there that are just going to hate me for saying this, but because of Rogue One, I really wish someone would now retcon A New Hope specifically for the Vader Obi-Wan fight scene
Hmm.
because Rogue One is the first time in a Star Wars movie that you really get to see just how bad ass Darth Vader is. Not Anakin
Yes.
Skywalker, because we got Anakin
Yeah.
in the prequels and blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah. I'm talking as his incarnation of Darth Vader when he has become the incarnate of evil, the butcher
He's
of the galaxy,
Yep.
and the fight scene at the end. I wish A New Hope could be retconned
Yep.
just for
Just
that,
make a new hope. Just make a new hope.
or just make a new fight scene.
Oh, you mean just plug the fight scene in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they could do that. Honestly, I would like to see these writers take on remaking A New Hope. I'd like to see that. And I know that is apocryphal to a bunch of people, but honestly, Rogue One is the writing is so much better.
Well,
And again,
because George Lucas can't write dialogue.
he cannot write dialogue. George Lucas is a genius at world building. Um, I don't think anybody does it better. But George Lucas is not a. I'm not going to say that Lucas is not personable because I don't think that's true. Um, George Lucas speaks in metaphor when he
Hmm.
talks.
Hmm.
Um, Carrie Fisher loves him for it. It drives Harrison Ford crazy.
Right.
or loved him for it. It's Carrie Fisher's past because they would get together and do script work because she was a script doctor for a long time. They would get together and work on scripts together.
Which, by the way, if you've never seen it, speaking of Harrison Ford, and I'm going to bring up Mark Hamill. Have you ever seen Mark Hamill impersonate Harrison Ford?
Oh my God,
It's
yeah.
brilliant. It's it's so funny.
Yeah,
It's so funny.
yeah, kid.
Um,
If they're worried about your hair, we're in trouble.
yes, it's so funny.
This is not that kind of
Um,
movie, kid.
I would not retcon all of A New Hope. I would not rewrite it. I just wish the fight scene between, and there's a good one out there online.
Hmm.
And basically what they do, I mean, they have Sir Alec Guinness for a second, and he's got his hood on, and for the rest of the fight, you're basically just seeing the hood. They could do that.
Yeah.
You don't actually see his
Honestly, they
face.
did that in the original film. He wasn't really there for for the actual stage combat. Because Michael Prowse was basically
David Prowse.
David Prowse. Sorry, I said Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of he's kind of a big old boy, and when you have a wooden sword and he hits you with a wooden sword, it's gonna push you around a little bit.
Yeah.
Not that he's mean. He was a big old boy.
But yeah, so I wouldn't call for an entire rewrite of A New Hope because
I don't know, man. I'd like
think
to see
that I think that diminishes it. I would just want that one scene. What I wish, take this group of writers and put them in charge of the Thrawn trilogy, the Heir to the Empire trilogy, because that's where I think Star Wars needs to go. We've talked about this on the show before. I think they do need to retcon Luke, Han, Leia, Lando, all that. I mean, we already have a Lando. We already have a Han Solo. I firmly believe Sebastian Stan could be a Mark Hamill or Luke Skywalker. We'd have to find
Carrie Fisher's daughter could play her. I'm sorry. I think she's fine. Yeah,
I think she absolutely could. Billy Lord.
Thank you. It was something Lord.
Yeah. But I think they use those actors and they make the Heir to the Empire trilogy that we've always wanted to see. The Star Wars sequels, episodes 7, 8, and 9, there was good in some of them. There was really, really bad in some of them. Part of that is Ruin Johnson, who I think doesn't belong in Star Wars, and I think he needs to go away. And I just didn't think they did the sequel right.
If anybody's going to do it, I'd like to see these people do it. Although it will take on a darker tone. But then again, you're also talking about genocides across a galaxy, so it kind of needs to. And honestly, George Lucas wrote and filmed a whole bunch of other shit for Star Wars, A New Hope, that we never got to see. A whole bunch of stuff going on Tatooine and his friends, and how the Empire was taking over different parts. We never got any of that because when they cut it, they were like, well, we want to make this more visually appealing to children.
Right.
And good or bad, there's a lot of that shit that we lost. What I like about Rogue One is, we got the visually appealing stuff, but the story was about the other shit that was going on. And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, because Rogue One is dark. It's gritty.
Yeah.
It's it's a caper flick. It's a caper flick.
It is a fucking caper flick.
And it's a war flick.
Yes, it is.
The battle, the end
Sands
battle
of Iwo Jima is going on in the middle of this film.
Yeah, the end battle is just amazing. And you talked about all these scenes that were cut. They used a lot of that in Rogue One for the space scenes.
Yes,
the space battle. There's a lot of really good there, and so I would.
There's some bits of film from 1976 that are in Rogue One when they're like gold leader standing by, and it's like, God, where did they get that? It's because it's been sitting around on a shelf for 50 years because they didn't want to put it in the original movie.
So take these people, let them do a retcon sequel. Because I do think that, and most big Star Wars fans like us are going to tell you this, that we deserve the Heir to the Empire treatment.
Yes,
that was what brought Star Wars back to us, and it's a phenomenal storyline. I know there's a lot of people that are like, the Skywalker series trilogy is over, or the Skywalker not trilogy, the Skywalker story is over. Saga, thank you. Move on to something else. I agree with that, but I do think we need an Heir to the Empire because I really want to completely retcon the sequels and have somebody go, "We're sorry, we made a mistake."
I don't know. I kind of like the sequels. I thought they were decent, but honestly, you're not dealing with. I don't want to make anybody mad. You're not dealing with great source material to begin with. A New Hope is not good. It is visually stunning.
I think A New Hope is good. I don't think it was bad story material. Like I said, I think they had a good path they started on
Hmm.
in The Force Awakens,
Yeah.
but I think they lost their way very quickly. Um, and you have the episode 8, which has a lot of problems, and then 9 was an attempt to make up for the problems in 8. And so it's just you've got a lot of problems there, and I just kind of want to put that to the side and say, yeah, this really didn't. They did it to the whole canon of Star Wars. They all this stuff that happened before Disney bought, they said is now legends.
Legends.
Um, and they've retconned that. Let's do
Yeah.
the same thing with these sequels. Let's do the Heir to the
Well,
Empire
honestly,
trilogy or
we're
trilogy
kind
and
of
move on.
getting it now. We're kind of getting it now. They brought Thrawn back.
Mm-hmm. For
Um,
Rebels, yeah.
yeah, well, and for
And
Ahsoka.
for Ahsoka, yeah.
Yeah. And well, and I want to say that this movie kind of gave credence to that
Mm-hmm.
because there is a prequel to this movie, a 2-season series called Andor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it kind of sets you up. You get to see Cassian Andor's story until he meets Jan Erso.
We covered Andor. Didn't we?
Did we?
We covered Andor. Surely we have.
Oh, that's right, because we had to do Andor before we did this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. The last one we did was Andor.
I'll have the episode here in just a moment.
So let me give you some for those who haven't seen it. This
Episode
is what
204.
Yeah, there we go. Research scientist Galen Erso and his family are in hiding on the planet Lamu when Imperial weapons developer Orson Krennic arrives to press him into completing the Death Star, a super weapon capable of destroying planets. Galen's wife Lyra is killed in the confrontation while their daughter Jen escapes and is rescued by rebel extremist Saul Guerrero. 15 years later, cargo pilot Bodhi Rook defects from the Empire, taking a holographic message from Galen to Shaw on the moon Jeddah. Rebel Alliance intelligence officer Cassian Andor learns of the Death Star and Bodhi's defection from an informant at Kafrene. Jin is freed from the Imperial labor camp on Wabani and is brought to the Rebel base on Yavin 4, where Rebel leader Mon Mothma, by the way, the lady that got playing Mon Mothma is fucking great.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, we only saw Mon Mothma for like 10 minutes in Return of the Jedi.
And A New Hope. She's in A New Hope as well.
Is she in A New Hope?
No,
I don't think she is.
No, you're right. You're right. I'm wrong. Sorry.
And they convince her to find Galen so the Alliance can learn more about the super weapon. What I like best about this, and then the Andor series, is Mon Mothma. I don't want to say she's afraid of getting her hands dirty, but she doesn't want anybody to die. She doesn't, she is. She has not been affected by the Empire as much as the people down in the trenches have.
No, absolutely not. And you get that in Andor because she's rich, she's wealthy.
She's wealthy.
She's a senator.
Yeah. But you see her in Rogue One. You see, and in a little bit of Andor, you see her turn from hey, we need to be cautious and we'll do this like this to fuck it, let's take the fight to them.
Right.
You get to see that turn on her, and it's like, God damn. And then they have this battle scene where they've got this planetary shield, and they have to get the shield turned off so they can get the signal out. Mm-hmm. And it's a planetary shield, so it's a big structure sitting over the planet, guarded by Star Destroyers, and they go in and they fuck that shit up. And it's down and it's dirty, and it's a smaller force using tactics against a larger, more unified force.
Guerrilla tactics.
It is guerrilla tactics, and they're doing it with space planes, and it is so cool to see. You'll see a lot of TikToks about it where they will play the scene and they'll put different music over it. Um, I've heard Fortunate Son, and I've heard Bulls on Parade,
Yeah.
and a whole bunch of different stuff. And it was like, oh my God, this is awesome. Shoot to Thrill, I thought was really good.
Seen that
AC/DC
one.
Shoot to Thrill, yeah. So there is a, as he said, there's a battle scene where the battle is taking place on the planet and above it in orbit at the same time. They drop rebels on this beach a la Sands of Iwo Jima. Only instead of coming out of Higgs boats, they're coming out of spaceships, and they are fighting an Imperial contingent. I mean, and it's not just a few guys. It is a group of highly trained rebels fighting some really, really hardcore, high trained troops, and there's a bunch of them. There is a okay. Spoilers. When the robot gets it, I turned to Kim and I said, I don't think anybody's going to make it out of this.
Yeah.
And Kim
Yeah.
was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think anybody makes it out of this. I was like, be prepared, dude. And, by the end of the film, we're both bawling. We also saw this. We went and saw this not only at the theater, we went and saw this on the Omni screen because they showed it at the Omni for a while. Worth it. Omni, we have in Fort Worth. It's like IMAX, but it's round. It's pretty amazing. The only problem with Omni is you do have to cut bits of the film can only be so long, so they will cut little bits of the film so it fits. Because that giant projecting unit can only hold so much film on it. I think now that they're using digital copies, it's a little bit better. They don't have to cut as much. But it is incredible on an Omni screen, and I'm assuming on IMAX as well. Although I always thought Omni was way more immersive. Yeah, that's the word.
100%. One of the big things about the OmniMax that, is really cool is, you've got stadium style seating in most theaters now, whereas the Omni, it's damn near straight up.
Yeah.
It's the angle you're at, and then the opening, I don't know if they still do it, but for years, what they started off every show with was a helicopter ride around Fort Worth. And it's a little disconcerting.
Yeah,
as
and
you're
the helicopter ends by basically landing on the dome that you're in, and the movie starts. They still do that. Keep in mind, if you ever get a chance to go to the Omni when you watch that helicopter ride, it was made about 1984, 1985.
Yeah.
So you actually get to see what Fort Worth used to look like.
Yeah.
But yes, they still do that, and it's pretty awesome. Yes, in OmniMax, it was incredible. That battle scene was off the fucking chain. It was loud, and so I would recommend seeing that film like that. Edwards did state the style of film would be similar to that of a war film, stating it's the reality of war. Good guys are bad guys are good. It's complicated, layered, a very rich scenario to which to set a movie. Assuming Disney would not allow a dark ending, Edwards had the main character surviving in the original version of the script. However, the producers opted for a more tragic ending and never filmed the original version. That's the way it should have ended. There should have been no way that small of a contingent would have beaten the day and got now. They did what they needed to do, and it is the reason why there is a rogue squadron in the rebel fleet later on. Rogue Squadron is because of them. They named that rebel fighter squadron.
And they bring that up in the movie too.
Yeah. which is amazing. Um, I'm looking at some production notes, but honestly, this film, um, this film is what I always wanted Star Wars to be, because to me it is in the vein of Empire Strikes Back, and we didn't really get that with the prequels. It was far more galactic in scope, and all this other stuff going on. The Clone Wars, but it didn't hit like this hit, and I can't explain why. You know what I'm saying? It's I can't put my finger on. Maybe it's because they lost. Because in The Empire Strikes Back, yes, Han was trapped in carbonite.
Hmm.
Yes, Luke lost his hand, but they were still okay. They were going to go get Han, and everything was going to be fine. Um, in this, it's like, oh, because what Mon Mothma was afraid of was that the rebellion would get crushed in its crib, because she had basically just kind of started it, or had, which you get in the Andor series. You get, oh shit, this is brand new, because it's a bunch of different rebellious acts, rebellious outfits, kind of working against the Empire, because they discover that it's evil. Um, it's not the separatists. It's not, although there are some separatists involved.
Hmm.
Um, I, go see this movie. Just go sit down and go see it. Just sit down and watch it. Um, it will affect you emotionally. It's
Sure.
that good. Yeah. It's an auteur piece of art, in my opinion. Um, Principal photography on the film began in Pinewood Studios on August 8th, 2015. Huge sets were built to complement scenes that were to be filmed elsewhere. The movie was shot using Ultra Panavision 70, which is why it looks so good in in IMAX and Omni, because they shot it in 70 millimeter. With Area LX's 65 large format digital 6K cameras. Filming also took place in various locations around the world. In Iceland, the crew shot in Reynis Fajara and around the mountains of, I'm not even going to attempt to say that, Hoffer Sea. That is where the Urso family was. It's obviously Iceland. Um, the Imperial Research Facility on Edu, respectively, also used a filming location where the Krafla, where they actually filmed inside a volcanic crater. Um, the island of Gan and Barashito on the Lamau Atoll in the Maldives, as well as the former RAF Bovingdon Airfield, were used to represent Scarif. Wadi Rum in Jordan and the fortification of Masada in Israel was used to represent Jeddah. Pimmy's Park in Edmonton, London, was also used for location filming. A scene set on Yavin 4 were filmed at Cardington Airfield. Edward selected London Underground's Canary Wharf Station as a location for a chase scene in an Imperial base. The location shoot took place overnight when the station was closed to the public. Oh, I thought that looked familiar. I've been to that station. Early reports put the production budget at $200 million. Another estimate shows that it was $280.2 million, but they got breaks from the UK Film Society tax breaks. So it ends up being, the final net cost of the film was $232.4 million, which is why they're saying it's between 200 and 280. It's 234 when you count in the fact that they got tax breaks and some money from the UK Film Commission, because the UK Film Commission is able to recoup some costs after the film, gets released. Um, but it made $1 billion. So, I mean, what, 4 times as much? Yeah, 4 times as much. So it was a success. Um, I don't know if it was a blockbuster. Was it a blockbuster? What constitutes a blockbuster?
Uh, okay, here we go. What
That's
constitutes
what's I'm looking up.
a blockbuster? Um, uh,
Is it
I,
nebulous?
no. Blockbuster movie. A highly popular, financially successful film, typically with a large budget, big stars, and widespread appeal. Designed to draw massive audiences and generate huge box office revenue, often becoming major cultural events with extensive marketing and merchandise.
Okay, so yeah, it was a
There you
blockbuster. Yeah, let's just call it a blockbuster. There you go.
go.
Yeah, because I thought there was actually I thought it was actually there was a formula as to what it was, but apparently not. It was a
Yes,
successful film.
earned over $1 billion worldwide, becoming the year's second highest grossing film and solidifying its place as a major cinematic success for Disney and Lucasfilm. There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
So the Andor series, which butts up quite nicely to this, um, shows the progression of Cassian Andor from, just like a kid trying to make it to a rebel leader. Um, dovetails quite nicely because when we get to this film, Cassian Andor is pretty fucking hardcore. He's a hardcore rebel leader. Yeah, that he was talking to his informant who used to be a friend, and he uses him as a human shield at one point because it's about the rebellion, not about his friendship. I don't necessarily want to say he's a bad guy because I don't think he is. He just doesn't have time for bullshit because he's got other things to do. It's the greater good idea, It's like, yeah, I got this friend, but if you're not with us, I don't have time to fuck with you. That kind of mentality, because that's kind of what you need in a rebellion against an oppressive empire, and you get that needle. Diego Luna threads that needle very well while still being, he's got that side of him, and he's also got that likability. Because when he gets with Jen Erso and realizes who she is and what she knows, um, that they're going to get this done. And he was going to shoot. There's a scene in the film where he's going to shoot her pops, and someone beats him to it because regardless of whether he's trying to help them or not, once they get the information, he doesn't want him to talk. You know what I mean? And he's fully prepared to just gack him while Jen's looking. Not necessarily to Jen, because as far as he's concerned, Jen is a rebel because she was working with Saul Guerrera for 10 years. But yeah, he's pretty hardcore, and I like that. I think I think we need more characters like that in this universe. Um, yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I got lost there for a second.
All right.
They did find some archival footage of Carrie Fisher saying "Hope," and it was used for the voice characterization of the building up of the Carrie Fisher. Peter Cushing, I think they could have just used that actor instead of because they did have an actor who had his voice down and did look kind of like him, and they just basically digitized his face. They could have just used the actor. I don't know why they did that with him. I understand the Carrie Fisher, because we needed her to be young and exuberant and say hope. But I don't know. I think you should have just used the dude for Peter Cushing, but he did come off pretty well. I liked it. I didn't think either one of those detracted from the film. Um, Again, in my opinion, this is the best Star Wars movie, and I've been circling around the drain, gushing about it for what 20 minutes now. So yeah, yes, go out and see Rogue One.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, yes, absolutely. Um, Rogue One is phenomenal. One thing I wanted to bring up, I wrote a note earlier.
Thank you.
The prequel. I've started doing that, by the way. I'm keeping notes when you say things because I don't want to just interrupt in the moment.
Thank you.
You said it takes place a week before New Hope. It
Yeah.
starts there. It ends literally minutes before.
Oh yeah. They're going into light speed with the Imperial remnant or the Imperial Star Destroyer behind them, and when they drop out of light speed, that's where New Hope starts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
You got that big crawl over your head. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. I love Rogue One. I agree. I can't say enough about Rogue One, how good it is. It's not your typical Star Wars with some Jedi mixed in. There is some Force lore in there, and but there's no Jedi.
It's very minor. Yeah, it's very minor.
Extremely minor. But it's beautifully shot. It's beautifully done. Start to finish, the movie is great. It's got great pacing, and it never lets up. I love Rogue One. Absolutely love Rogue One.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And you basically get to see the different factions of rebels. Because, when we see them in A New Hope, they have unified.
Right.
They got unified because of this event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And we get more of that in Andor. But you couldn't have Andor without this movie first.
Well,
like if they'd have made the Andor series up to Rogue One, because you're watching the Andor series and you're thinking, he's going to die tragically.
Right.
It's amazing.
So one of the things about A New Hope that's never really addressed is you have this small rebel contingency that's going up against the Death Star. Where did they get all their pilots? Where did they get all these ships? This is where the earlier stuff starts explaining this. You really get this in Rebel when you find out they're stealing ships.
Yeah.
Which is what they have to do. They have to steal ships. They don't have their own shipyard where they're producing all this stuff. They are stealing.
They're stealing shit.
And so that's what I like about Rogue One. You find out they had to do a lot of stealing to get where they were for A New Hope. So
or taking with the Mon Calamari, taking their ships that were basically pleasure cruisers, like like it's like the Pacific Princess, and turn that motherfucker into a battleship. That's what they did.
That's what Home One is. The big rebel command ship in Return of the Jedi. It's called Home One. That's a former luxury liner.
Yeah. Luxury liner, that was the word I was looking for. Yes. Yeah, it's a luxury liner that got turned into a battleship.
Yes. They took medical frigates and turned them into combat ships.
Yep.
You see that. And that's the reason. That's the reason. And I think of this so much more as an adult. With the exception of the fighters the rebels have are beautiful ships. The capital ships the rebels have are ugly as shit.
They pulled them from everywhere. There's an old blockade runner. You got
yes. The
you
Empire
got a hammerhead for
the Empire has all
around.
These sleek, cool ships, but they have military shipyards. They have Cinear systems that's building all the TIE fighters, and I'd honestly have to look up which manufacturer is the Star Destroyers. I don't remember off the top of my head. I just know that Cinear is TIE fighters.
Yeah, and when he says shipyards, it's not just one. They've got them all over.
Yeah.
And and as a matter of fact, I want to say that, and we're finally starting to see this in like video games. Eventually, the rebels, after they take out the emperor, um, but they actually end up capturing some Star Destroyers and using them themselves.
Hmm.
Like they have a fleet by the end, like by the Battle of Jeddah, not
Hmm.
Jeddah.
No, 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 not Jeddah. But one of the big one of their biggest command ships that they use in the Heir to the Empire series is the Chimera.
Mhm.
It's a Star Destroyer led by Admiral pa Paleon, I think it is, who is a former Imperial who has now come over to the Rebel
Yeah.
side, and he's in charge of the Chimera. Yeah, they end up taking a lot of these shipyards. The end. hmm, If you go into Legends, which the Heir to the Empire trilogy is, at the end of the war, when they destroy the Emperor, the new um the new alliance,
The New Republic.
the New Republic, thank you, that's what I was looking for. The New Republic, they're still fighting some Imperial contingencies that are left because not every Imperial was at the second Death Star.
No.
Most of them were,
Yeah.
but there is still the Imperial remnant out there that they have to contend with. When you get to the sequel that they do in the Star Wars movies, it's now the first galactic or the New Order,
Yeah.
the
The
New
First
Order.
Order.
Um, they that's one of the problems I have when you get to the second series, and I don't want to take too much time to get in there. They really make it look like the rebels really never won. They destroyed the second Death Star, but the Empire still pretty much was big and badass out there.
Yeah.
That's not how it was supposed to be. The rebels do win, and they do create the New Republic, and they are the big force in the galaxy, but they're the Imperial remnant they're still having to deal with.
Yes.
That's out there. So anyway, Rogue One, great movie, love it. Go see it, please.
Yes.
It's on Disney Plus.
Yes.
So awesome.
Watch it today.
Yeah, watch it today.
It's a Sunday.
Well,
When this is released, we actually released on Sundays and record on Sundays. So
right. Well, for some of us, there's football to watch, so that doesn't exactly happen. But the football.
Man, fuck that football.
Anyway,
Dull sport to watch.
no, not to me, not to Mr. Shanks.
It's 4 hours for an hour worth of action.
We love it. We love it. All right. With that, I will step over to the murder side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off the New Zealand Herald, the Anchorage Daily News, the Cinemaholic Medium, Alaska Bureau of Investigation, North Slope Crime Files, and the Atlantic. And this is the Alaskan pipeline murders.
The Alaskan pipeline murders.
The wind in Alaska, it hits differently. It doesn't just move through the trees, bite at your skin. It carries things, stories, secrets, and warnings whispered from frozen ground. In the mid-1970s, when the Trans-Alaska Pipeline was rising from one end of the state to the other, that wind carried with it something darker. It was a sense of unease that settled over the boomtowns, camps, and makeshift bars that grew up in the shadow of the construction sites. Tens of thousands of men poured into Alaska, chasing money, adventure, or escape. Some brought their families. Some brought their demons with them. And some brought intentions that were too dark to speak. Anchorage itself became the beating heart of this frenzy. Oil money flowed. There were new businesses that sprang up overnight. The city swelled beyond anything it had ever seen. But with this boom came the undercurrent. There was violence, disappearances, assaults, and a rising number of women, especially indigenous women and sex workers, who simply vanished. There were actually scores of them. They were pulled from rivers, found in ditches, left in frozen clearings miles from the nearest road, and some were never found at all. At first, no one connected the dots. Alaska was huge. It was wild. It was unforgiving. People got lost. People ran away. Some people froze to death or drowned, and that was the story officials told themselves, and that was the story the public believed. However, though, as years went on, troopers began to see a pattern forming beneath the snow and silence. There was a pattern that was stretching hundreds of miles from Anchorage to Fairbanks, From the pipeline corridor to the fishing towns along the coast, there were women disappearing in ways that were way too similar, too frequent, and too targeted to ignore. It wasn't one camp, and it wasn't one town, and it wasn't one moment of violence. It was a shadow that was following the pipeline itself. It moved with the workers, and it lingered just long enough for another woman to go missing before drifting on again. This shadow may have only belonged to one man, or three, or 10, but it's a shadow that has never been fully identified. To this day, the number of victims is not known, the number of killers is not known, and the truth of what happened during the height of Alaska's oil boom is really still buried beneath the snow, time, and silence. What we do know is this: between 1974 and 1983, a cluster of murders and disappearances shook the state so profoundly that investigators finally gave it a name: pipeline murders. The story of what happened during those years of chaos is really one of the darkest and least understood chapters in Alaskan history. When people think of serial killers in Alaska, two names usually dominate the conversation: Robert Hansen and Israel Keyes, both of whom I've covered.
Yeah, we've talked about them.
Robert Hansen was episode 47, and Israel Keyes was episode 38. Their stories are very terrifying. They're very cinematic and very unforgettable, but they're not the whole story. Alaska has a much quieter, darker chapter, and one that just kind of sits in the margins of police reports. It still sits in the memories of families who are waiting for answers, and it still sits in the shadows cast by the Trans-Alaska Pipeline during the construction boom. Between 1974 and 1983, Alaska experienced one of the largest industrial booms in American history. The oil pipeline promised prosperity, jobs, and opportunities for anyone willing to brave the cold. Tens of thousands of men from the lower 48 states came pouring into the state. Most of them brought dreams of better lives, but others brought habits that they hoped that the wilderness would cleanse. But mixed into that migration and hidden among the laborers, the drifters, truck drivers, security contractors, and thrill seekers were predators who understood that Alaska offered something they couldn't find anywhere else: isolation, anonymity, and miles upon miles of landscape where no one would ever stumble onto what they left behind. During the height of the boom, women, especially indigenous women and sex workers, as I had said before, began to disappear at an alarming rate. Some were found murdered, some never found at all. And their cases stretched along the pipeline corridor and in the cities that supported it, forming a pattern that investigators struggled to find. The victims came from Anchorage, Fairbanks, remote villages, and transient encampments. Some were teenagers, some were young mothers, but all of them lived on the edges of a very rapidly changing state, and for years, no one connected the dots. Alaska in the 70s was not the Alaska of today. Law enforcement agencies were understaffed, underfunded, and overwhelmed. There was no national database as we have today, no rapid communication between jurisdictions, no coordinated missing person systems. A victim who vanished in Anchorage might never have her case compared to a similar disappearance in Fairbanks or Valdez. And for many indigenous women, their disappearances weren't even fully documented. The result of this was a perfect storm of chaos, silence, and opportunity, and one that may have allowed one or more serial killers to operate undetected for nearly a decade. Again, this cluster of unsolved murders and disappearances is collectively known as the pipeline murder. And it's a name that really captures both the geography of the era, but really fails to convey the human cost behind it. And unlike other cases in this series I'm doing of the A to Z across America of serial killers, the pipeline murders don't lead to a single perpetrator with a familiar face or a courtroom confession. Instead, they really kind of form a haunting tapestry of violence woven into a moment in American history when Alaska was transforming faster than anyone could keep track of. So today, we're going to step into that shadowy chapter. I'm not here to sensationalize it, but to reconstruct it. I want to bring clarity where there's only been speculation. I want to honor the lives lost in a time when the world was too distracted to notice. So, welcome to Alaska, and welcome to the pipeline murders. To understand the pipeline murders, you have to understand Alaska itself, not from travel brochures or reality TV. But this was Alaska during the violent transformation of the 1970s. It was a state on the edge of change, place where modern industry collided with raw wilderness and where tens of thousands of people arrived in a span so short that law enforcement infrastructure and entire communities could barely keep up. In 1968, the massive oil fields at Prudhoe Bay were discovered, revealing what would become one of the largest petroleum reserves in North America. But there was a problem. It was trapped in a frozen landscape with no way to move it south. So the solution was the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System, which was 800 miles of a steel artery stretching from the Prudhoe Bay to Valdez. Construction began in 1974, and almost overnight, Alaska changed. The project itself required a workforce that didn't exist in the state, so companies recruited from the lower 48. And within months, thousands of men from every corner of the country arrived in Fairbanks, Anchorage, and Valdez, and dozens of smaller communities along the route. Some of these were skilled welders and heavy equipment operators. Some were just desperate for work. Some were running from debt, had criminal records or broken lives, but all of them arrived in a land with almost no oversight and no social infrastructure prepared to absorb them. Pipeline camps in nearby towns became instant boom towns full of money, alcohol, drugs, and people seeking relief from grueling shifts and bitter cold. Bars and strip clubs exploded in number. Temporary housing developments rose and fell within months, and Anchorage, still a relatively small city at the time, became a swirling hub of transient workers, lonely drifters, young runaways, and people trying to reinvent themselves. And when you get thousands of men with high wages, because they were getting paid well.
Oh yeah, I've heard stories about dudes that worked on the pipeline that went up there and basically made a fortune.
Sure.
The ones that were smart and just held on to it.
Well, but a lot of these didn't hold on to it. They had these new high incomes, and they had few outlets for stress, which that all converged in this region, and vulnerability became currency. Danger became an ambient part of the landscape.
It's the reason why Fort Worth exists, is because of that particular urgency.
Sure.
Because we had this section of town that was all bars and ladies of the evening looking to separate cowboys from their wealth. And I bet there's all kinds of stuff in Anchorage for this exact
absolutely
purpose.
Women, particularly those working in the sex trade or living in unstable housing, often became the targets of violence. Many were assaulted, many were threatened, and many simply disappeared. The farther north you went, the less likely it was that a missing woman's case would be taken seriously if it was reported at all. For Alaska's Native and Indigenous women, the situation was even more dire. Historical prejudice meant their disappearances received far less attention. Records were inconsistently kept. Jurisdictions overlapped chaotically between tribal authorities, state troopers, and federal agencies. Some families were told their daughters had run away or that they were, quote, probably fine. And so most never received the proper follow-up or a meaningful investigation.
Oh, I'm sure they're fine. Man, fuck you.
Right. These are what are the earliest roots of what would be later known as the MMIW crisis, the missing and murdered Indigenous women. But in the 1970s, the public had not heard this acronym yet. No one was campaigning for reforms, and predators knew this system well enough to recognize who would and who wouldn't be missed. For those that don't know, if you live under a rock, Alaska is massive, and not just big, but it's unpoliceable in many ways. There is over 663,000 square miles. There's only a handful of highways. There's vast areas of Alaska that are only reachable by plane, boat, or snow machine, and weather that destroys evidence faster than any suspect ever could.
Yeah, you get 6 feet of snow overnight. That is not that uncommon.
Well, and a body left near the pipeline road would be buried under snow within hours.
Yeah.
A missing woman could be dozens or hundreds of miles from where she was last seen, and investigators often had no way to connect a disappearance in Anchorage to one near Fairbanks unless someone happened to notice similarities, which without modern databases was nearly impossible.
Not only that, they have grizzly bears and wolves in Alaska as well. So they will, if they see a carcass, they don't care what it is. They're hungry.
Sure. And what this created a very rare and deadly combination: high transience, minimal oversight, inconsistent reporting, lack of communication between agencies, cultural blind spots, massive geographic isolation, and a booming sex trade supplying thousands of pipeline workers. Among the thousands of pipeline employees were men who used aliases, men with violent pasts, and men who drifted between camps. And these were men who understood the vastness of the land well enough to know how to make a body disappear forever. Law enforcement was overwhelmed, social services were overwhelmed, hospitals were overwhelmed, and predators, whether opportunistic or organized, recognized instantly that Alaska in the 1970s was a place they could hunt without consequence.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I bet the pipeline workers probably doubled the population of the state overnight.
yeah, and it's within this perfect storm of wilderness wealth and want that the cluster known as the pipeline murders emerged, which is an era where women vanished at a rate that should have raised alarm, but went largely unnoticed until years later when patterns began to emerge. One of the most difficult parts of investigating the pipeline murders is that there is no official list of victims. There's no formal acknowledgement of a serial predator, not a single case file. Instead, investigators and researchers had to reconstruct this story through a mosaic of missing persons reports, partial news stories, police interviews, and the memories of families who still didn't have answers. What is clear is that between the mid 1970s and early 1980s, a cluster of murdered and missing women emerged along the pipeline corridor and in the urban centers that supported it. The victims shared striking similarities, not just in who they were, but in how they disappeared. When trying to define victimology, investigators eventually identified three broad categories of women who were most at risk during the boom. Number one was indigenous women and Alaskan native villagers. These women were disproportionately targeted. Many came from small villages seeking seasonal work or traveled to Anchorage for education, medical visits, or jobs. Others lived in transient housing or boarding arrangements. Their disappearances were often met with bureaucratic indifference. Agencies passing responsibility to one another lost reports or assumptions they had returned home. Their cases were the least documented, the least investigated, and the least publicized, despite forming one of the largest group of victims within the suspected pipeline cluster. Number two, sex workers, dancers, and women working in boomtown nightlife. Um, with the thousands of pipeline workers who were rotating through Anchorage and Fairbanks, there were a massive sex trade grew around them. Many women working in this environment lived paycheck to paycheck with few support systems. If one disappeared, club owners or roommates might not notice for days. Some victims were last seen getting into vehicles outside bars or being approached by men claiming to be offering rides to camps, and several were found miles outside of city limits, often along construction roads or near the pipeline itself. The third is young runaways and transient women, because this boom attracted teenagers and young adults from the lower 48 states who came seeking adventure or work. Many ended up living in unstable or dangerous conditions, hostels, shared apartments, or temporary encampments near work sites. When they vanished, their families often didn't know where to begin looking. Some were never reported at all. And while the true number is unknown, investigators eventually identified a series of cases that appeared to form a pattern. These are the most frequently referenced cases. The first one is the Cindy Betts case in 1971. This one occurred slightly before the main boom, but Cindy Betts is widely considered one of the earliest cases connected to the cluster. She was a 21-year-old woman from Anchorage whose body was found in a gravel pit outside the city. Her murder went unsolved, but investigators in later years viewed her case as the first in a long sequence of similarly staged scenes. Isolated outdoor disposal, minimal forensics evidence, and a victim profile matching later victims. She had no connection to drugs, no history of running away, no known enemies, and her case went cold almost immediately. But when investigators revisited her file in the 1980s, what stood out was she was a female victim, isolated disposal site, and no forced entry and outdoor staging consistent with later cases. She became the unofficial case zero of the pipeline cluster, which was an early warning sign that no one recognized at the time. The next is the pipeline prostitutes cluster in the mid 1970s. Anchorage police began seeing the same disturbing cycle. A young woman working near 4th Avenue, last seen entering a car, leaving with an unknown man, missing for several days or weeks, and body found along a remote road used by pipeline workers, hunters, or truck drivers. This group of murders represents the heart of the pipeline murders, and it really had a distinct pattern. Investigators still see them as the clear sign of a serial predator. We've got several cases that share nearly identical characteristics, and they've never been named. So we've got victim A, which was a woman in her early 20s. She was an Alaskan native, last seen outside a downtown bar in a car with an unidentified man. Her remains were found by pipeline contractors along the Nick River Access Road, which was an area known for pipeline traffic. Signs of robbery, no signs of extended struggle, and the body was left in a secluded area requiring local or worker knowledge. Victim B was a dancer reported by missing coworkers after failing to show up for 2 shifts. She was last seen leaving work with plans to meet a friend. She was found near a pipeline laydown yard outside of Anchorage. She had no connection to victims outside of Anchorage, and the dump site matched industrial worker patterns. Victim C was a sex worker reported missing by outreach volunteers. She was last seen speaking to a volunteer from a women's shelter. Her body was found near a gravel turnout used frequently by contractors. She was a victim known to trust people offering rides, and there was no signs that she intended to travel and run away. Their names were withheld to respect the families who have never been closure. Each case had subtle differences, but their similarities really overshadowed the differences. Again, they were last seen downtown. Their bodies were placed, not hidden. Disposal sites tied directly to pipeline traffic, and the behavior consistent with an offender who felt safe on work roads. For many troopers, again, these cases formed the spine of the cluster. Then you had the Fairbanks cases in the late 70s. The pipeline was pushing north, and so did the disappearances. Several women went missing around Fairbanks during the height of camp construction. One was seen last hitchhiking between camps. Another was a bartender who frequently served workers, and a third vanished from a motel near the Richardson Highway. Few of these cases were ever linked officially due to jurisdictional fragmentation between city police, state troopers, and military authorities stationed nearby. Next were the rural and indigenous community cases, and really some of the most heartbreaking cases came from villages and rural communities where young women simply vanished after traveling to hub cities for work or services. Examples include a teenage girl visiting relatives in Anchorage who disappeared during a weekend outing, a woman from a coastal fishing town whose body was later found off a pipeline service road, and a young mother whose disappearance was never investigated because authorities assumed she had, quote, chosen a new life. Families reported these women as missing, and many were told to, quote, check back in a few weeks. Some cases were reopened decades later as part of the MMIW initiatives, but the trail had long gone cold at this point. Next were the Anchorage corridor murders in the late 70s to early 80s. Anchorage developed what local papers called the corridor, which was a series of remote roadside areas where bodies, clothing, or personal effects were found. These were the Glen Highway, the Seward Highway, the Nick River access points, old pipeline construction trails, remote pullouts near Eklutna, Palmer, and Eagle River. Victims here ranged from teenagers to women in their 30s. Some had clear signs of homicide, and others were found too late to determine cause of death. But the geography itself told a story. Someone with knowledge of the land and likely access to pipeline roads was transporting victims away from the city and disposing them in areas rarely traveled by non-workers. By the early 80s, journalists and Alaska state troopers began noticing similarities. Victims were overwhelmingly young women. Many were indigenous or connected to Anchorage nightlife. Many were last seen with pipeline workers or transient men. Bodies were found near construction or access roads. Many cases involved no forced entry, suggesting a stranger lure scenario. And several were found in shallow snow or gravel pits, indicating attempted concealment. So this made it no longer a coincidence. This was a cluster, and for the first time, the word serial began to appear in internal memos, even if the public never heard it. One killer, many killers, or the perfect storm. And one of the most haunting questions about the pipeline murders is the simplest. Was this the work of one serial killer or many? Unlike the cases I talked about before, Robert Hansen or Israel Keys, where law enforcement identified a single offender and could trace patterns, geography, and victim selection, The pipeline murders take place really in a lot of uncertainty. There's no single crime scene. There's no consistent MO, no shared signature. And instead, investigators found themselves staring at a cluster of murders and disappearances that seemed to be linked not by ritual, but by opportunity. Alaska offered predators more opportunity than anywhere else in the country. And as investigators reviewed dozens of cases, several profiles have emerged, and none have been proven, but all remain possibilities. Profile one is the transient pipeline worker, which is the most popular law enforcement theory. And this is the most widely accepted profile, that it was a man who worked on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline who moved from camp to camp as construction progressed. And why this profile fits is because pipeline workers were always highly transient. They stayed for weeks or months at a time before rotating out. Many arrived with criminal backgrounds, addiction issues, or unstable histories. The men were paid extremely well for the time, sometimes more money than they had ever earned before. Bars, clubs, and sex work venues sprung up specifically to serve pipeline crews, creating direct access to vulnerable women. Workers frequently traveled the same remote roads where bodies were later found. Some access roads were restricted, meaning the killer likely had authorized entry. Once construction ended that segment, workers moved on, and with them, the murders sometimes did too. The key behavioral hallmark was a killer who understood mobility as camouflage. In other words, quote, kill in one camp, disappear into the next. Several cases appeared to stop abruptly after certain work rotations ended, leading troopers to believe these crimes may have been tied to specific contractor schedules. Profile two is the long-haul trucker theory, and this is the corridor killer theory. Long-haul truckers servicing the pipeline corridor were another strong suspect pool. This profile fit because truckers traveled alone for long stretches through remote areas. Many routes passed directly by the dump sites associated with multiple cases. They frequently interacted with sex workers in Anchorage and Fairbanks. They could easily transport victims far from where they were last seen, and some trucking companies hired workers with minimal background check.
That makes sense. That really does make sense because they had to have that road built along the pipeline. Because I was just I've been looking up maps of the pipeline. I did not realize that the pipeline runs through basically the middle of Alaska straight down.
Yep.
So it goes from the bay where they've got the oil all the way down. Yeah, all the way down to Is it Valdez?
It may be Valdez. I said Valdez. It may be Valdez.
Yeah, which is like right across the bay from Anchorage. So, and Fairbanks is right in the middle. I'm like, oh, that's actually the perfect place to build it.
Mm-hmm.
They also build it in zigzags and above the ground, so to protect from permafrost, so animals can migrate through it. And it's zigzagged, so if there's a big earthquake, it just the supports move. So,
right.
Brilliant engineering, by the way. But they had to build a road along it because, again, yes, they'll work at this camp, and they'll keep working until the point of getting out there is too far, and they'll make another camp.
Correct.
Yeah, but you have to transport all of the equipment, so you've got trucks running up and down this road the whole time. You're right; it's a perfect story. I'm kind of on the theory of the trucker because it just makes more sense.
Well, the pattern here, where several victims were found near pullouts that were used by truckers to rest or chain up tires, and bodies showed signs of being transported then discarded without lingering at the scene. This mirrored other trucker-linked serial cases in the lower 48 states, suggesting that Alaska may have had its own version of the highway serial killer phenomenon. We've talked about several highway serial killers in the past. Profile 3 was the fisherman or coastal drifter. Movement follows fishing seasons. Alaska's fishing industry attracts transient workers similar to pipeline crews, but with extremely chaotic seasonal migrations. This profile emerged because several victims disappeared during the high summer fishing season. Some were found near docks, boat access points, or coastal trailheads. Fishing vessels provided isolation, temporary shelter, and the ability to move between towns unnoticed. A few suspects interviewed over the years admitted to picking up women in Anchorage during shore leave. And in this profile, the killer's presence aligned with the ebb and flow of coastal work, which vanished each winter and then reappeared with the seasonal boom. Profile 4 was the local predator who blended in. This is the Anchorage operator theory. Not all predators arrived from out of state. Some grew up there, and this theory suggests that at least one Anchorage-based offender, not a transient, exploited the influx of workers, knowing that police attention was focused heavily on the outsiders. This profile fits because a local man would understand roads, trails, and remote dumping areas far better than visiting workers. Some victims were killed in ways suggesting the killer had consistent access to the area year-round. And a few potential suspects were small business owners or contractors who interacted daily with transient populations. This theory gained more traction after the Robert Hansen case broke open, which was proof that at least one Alaska-born predator operated during the same window. Profile 5 is multiple killers operating simultaneously. They say the evidence doesn't point to one man. And this is kind of really the most disturbing and increasingly accepted theory, is that the pipeline murders were never the work of a serial killer at all, but many. The supporting points of this are victim disposal methods varied widely. Injury patterns differed significantly from case to case. Some victims were carefully placed, others were dumped. Timelines overlapped in ways that would be difficult for one man to maintain. Sexual violence indicators differed among cases, and the modus operandi shifted too dramatically across the cluster. In other words, the pipeline era may have attracted multiple serial predators, some local, some transient, some opportunistic, who recognized that Alaska in the 70s offered an environment with minimal accountability. Several FBI analysts reviewing the cases in the 80s and early 90s independently concluded that more than one man was responsible. Profile 6 is the opportunistic drifter. They say this is the simplest theory. A drifter, unemployed, unstable, violent, and unattached. These men were known to roam between Fairbanks, Anchorage, and Valdez biker bars, sleeping in their trucks or in temporary housing, taking odd jobs, and vanishing. The behavioral features here were no consistent victim type, no fixed location, violence driven by opportunity, anger, or impulse, and disposal driven by isolation rather than ritual. Some of these men were known to pick up sex workers and hitchhikers. Some were later jailed for domestic violence or assault. A few were suspected but never conclusively tied to the cluster. Profile 7, a killer hiding behind the boom itself. And this is the, quote, perfect camouflage theory. In this theory, the killer's true identity is less important than understanding that the boom created such chaos that any violent predator, whether organized or opportunistic, could operate with near impunity. As I'd stated earlier, the state was not prepared for this influx of people. Police were not prepared, communities were not prepared, and the killers, whoever they were, recognized that instantly.
They brought a 4-foot wide pipe from the top of Alaska to the bottom of it in all kinds of weather for like 4 years, and it's 800 miles long.
Right.
It would have doubled the population of the state easily.
The truth is, the pipeline murders likely cannot be pinned on any single man, but what unites all suspect profiles is this: knowledge of Alaska's terrain, access to transportation, access to vulnerable women, and the confidence that no one would connect the dots. And for nearly a decade, no one did. The pipeline murders themselves are not a single case. They're a collection of tragedies connected by geography, timeline, victim type, and investigative blind spots. Each case is heartbreakingly incomplete on its own, but taken together, they reveal a chilling pattern of violence born from Alaska's boom years. Some names are not public records. Some families requested privacy over the years, and some victims remain officially unidentified. All of them deserve to be remembered. Over the years, several sets of unidentified remains have been discovered along maintenance roads, ATV trails, snow machine routes, riverbanks, and gravel pits. In some cases, the remains were too decomposed to confirm homicide, but the patterns raised alarms. Cold case investigators believe that several of these remains could belong to missing women from the pipeline era, but without DNA matches, their identities remain unknown. The patterns allowed investigators to form the first theories about the offender, but they also complicated the search because for every clear match, there were exceptions. For every consistent element, there was a case that broke the mold, and that raised the next essential question: was this the work of one man or many? Which brings us really to the investigation itself and why the pipeline murders were nearly impossible to solve. If the pipeline murders happened today in a modern city with digital records, coordinated databases, license plate readers, unified law enforcement, they might have been solved decades ago. There might be faces attached to names, families with closure, and a clear understanding of what truly happened during this oil boom. But the murders did not happen in a modern city. It's in Alaska. This was during one of the most chaotic periods in the state history. Every structural weakness that could hinder an investigation existed simultaneously, creating the perfect cover for one or more predators to operate unchecked. Like I said, Alaska is too big for traditional policing. Even today, the vast areas of the state remain accessible only by plane boat, snow machine, or multi-day hikes. In the 70s, it was even worse. Bodies were discovered in places troopers could only reach by helicopter, bush plane, occasionally dog sleds, or navigational instinct. The evidence, most of the evidence didn't survive. A body left in the fall could be buried in the snow until the spring. A body left in the spring could be destroyed by wildlife within hours. You had rain, thaw, freeze, and wind that obliterated footprints, tire tracks, biological traces. Crime scenes were often discovered months too late, sometimes years. With no meaningful forensic evidence left behind, investigators were often left with partial remains, scattered clothing, and a location that offered more question than answers. Many victims were living transient lives, couch surfing, working in the sex trade, hitchhiking, not in regular communication with family, new to Alaska, known only by nicknames. A woman who didn't show up for her shift or wasn't seen in days might not be reported missing for a week or at all. For Indigenous women, the situation was even worse. Reports were lost, ignored, or never taken. Some families were told their daughters probably ran off. Language barriers prevented proper documentation. Missing persons systems were primitive. There was no centralized database, no statewide mechanism to compare cases, no Amber Alerts, no rapid communication between Anchorage and Fairbanks unless someone made a physical phone call, and cases disappeared into filing cabinets, and so did many of the women. The pipeline-related crimes could theoretically involve Alaska State Troopers, Anchorage Police Department, Fairbanks PD, Valdez PD, Valdez, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, tribal councils, U.S. Marshals, military police, pipeline security agencies, city or borough level authorities. None of them were talking to each other. A missing woman in Anchorage might be found near Fairbanks, but unless a trooper remembered a similar case, no one connected the dots. Multiple police departments investigated with different procedures, different record systems, and different priorities. And by the time anyone attempted to connect the cases, years had passed, files were scattered, and evidence had been degraded beyond usefulness. Pipeline workers moved constantly. A suspect could be in Anchorage 1 week, Fairbanks the next, Valdez 2 weeks later, and then vanishing into the rotation and leaving no paper trail except a timesheet. Investigators repeatedly found that a potential suspect had left the state, another quit his job and returned to the lower 48, another was only in Alaska for 10 days, another used a false name upon hiring. Without digital records, tracing them became nearly impossible. Some of the men who interacted with victims were gone before police even realized a crime had occurred. The FBI's behavioral science unit was still in its infancy. No one had coined terms like organized killer, cooling off period, post-disposal typology. Investigators didn't have modern frameworks for linking cases by signature, analyzing victimology, determining geographic patterns. Instead, they relied literally on paper maps and handwritten notes pinned to corkboards, assuming the information even made it to one central location. Some files remained in Anchorage, some stayed in Fairbanks, some were lost during departmental transition, and some never left the desk of retiring officers, so no one saw the entire pattern. In today's world, investigators can find a killer with touch DNA, digital genealogy, forensics mapping, trace soil analysis, cell tower pings, GPS data. In the 70s, they had fingerprints, only if the suspect had a criminal record, blood typing, rudimentary hair analysis, visual comparison, witness statements. Outdoor crime scenes were almost always compromised, leaving nothing usable, and in many cases, the remains were too decomposed to determine cause of death, manner of death, and whether it was a homicide. Cases were often closed for lack of evidence, others were classified as unknown, and a few were improperly ruled accidental despite suspicious circumstances. Again, Alaska was booming, money was flowing, politicians were celebrating the pipeline's success, and communities were struggling to keep up with the growth. In the midst of that, women, especially indigenous women and sex workers, were going missing and turning up dead, but society did not treat it as a crisis. Newspapers focused on economic growth, pipeline milestones, and job opportunities, not on missing indigenous girls, not on murdered sex workers, and not on transient women no one recognized. It wasn't until the Robert Hansen case broke in the early 80s that the public realized a serial killer could thrive in Alaska's shadows, but by then the pipeline cluster had largely ended. Many of the victims had already been forgotten, and this may be the most important investigative barrier of it all. The boom itself provided mobility, anonymity, environmental cover, access to victims, access to isolated disposal sites, reduced scrutiny, and law enforcement overwhelmed by other crimes. The predator didn't have to be clever, just opportunistic, and the landscape did the rest. Dozens of cases scattered across a state the size of a continent, buried in snow, bureaucracy, and silence. By the time investigators realized they were dealing with a pattern, most of the evidence and most of the suspects were already gone. To this day, the pipeline murders remain one of the most challenging unsolved clusters in American history.
Oh my God. And the boom ending also helped them cover their tracks.
Yeah, right. Um, and and as I'm about to reveal in this next part, the legacy of these cases really echo painfully into the present. The shadow of the pipeline murders is still cast over Alaska. The pipeline murders are more than a cluster of unsolved cases from a half century ago. They're a symptom of something deeper that still shapes Alaska today. It's a reminder of the people who vanished without justice and the families left waiting, and the systemic gaps that allowed a predator or predators to operate unseen. Now, decades after the pipeline boom has ended, the legacy of these murders continue to influence how Alaska views crime, policing, indigenous rights, and the vulnerability of women living in the margins. Although the official status of many victims remains unsolved, the truth is really is far harsher. Most cases were not actively investigated for years. They were limited by missing documentation, lost evidence, retired detectives, degraded remains, lack of jurisdictional authority, and no DNA technology, and victims whose disappearances weren't taken seriously. By the time modern cold case teams revisited these files, some of these boxes contain a little more than a name, a date, a rough location, and a set of skeletal remains. So it's really impossible to investigate what was never properly recorded in the first place because these cases were scattered across the jurisdictions. Many families never realized their loved one's murder or disappearance was part of a larger pattern. They were told she probably ran away. She'll turn up. Maybe she went back to the village. She might have taken a job down south. Years later, though, families read about the pipeline murders in newspapers, and they finally understood it wasn't just their daughter, it was dozens of daughters. Some families blame the pipeline boom for swallowing their children, and others blame the system that refused to see them. But the reality of it is, many victims came from communities where mistrust of law enforcement was already high. These cases only deepen that divide. There is growing national awareness surrounding the MMIW, and it forced Alaska to confront some very uncomfortable truths. Indigenous women in Alaska experience some of the highest rates of violence in the United States to this day. Their cases are underreported, underinvestigated, and underpublicized. The pipeline era just magnified these vulnerabilities dramatically. When modern MMIW advocates look at the pipeline murders, they see the early roots of this crisis: systemic indifference, cultural invisibility, and the normalization of violence against Indigenous women. Some advocates suspect that the true number of victims during the pipeline era is dramatically higher than official counts because so many cases were never filed or were misclassified. Though not widely publicized, troopers in the early 2000s created an internal review of unsolved female homicide victims from 1969 to 1985. Several pipeline era cases were flagged as high probability connections to serial activities. They identified similarities in last known locations, shared dump sites, overlapping offender access roads, clusters near worker trails, multiple victims last seen without a state men. But unfortunately, without DNA, witnesses or surviving suspects, even strong patterns can't produce arrests. Some names have emerged as persons of interest, transient men with violent histories, but each has died, disappeared, or moved long before investigators could catch up. In the end, the review honestly has raised more questions than answers. Several remains from the pipeline era homicides are still held in state custody. Cold case investigators hope that one day advances in forensics genealogy, advanced isotope analysis, mitochondrial DNA reconstruction, and population-based DNA matching may allow some victims to be identified. The killers, however, unless DNA happens to survive on clothing or bone fragments, which is unlikely in Alaska's climate, there may never be enough to identify them. And as the decades pass, this window is narrowing. Before Robert Hansen and Israel Keys, the pipeline years really showed how easily predators could operate in Alaska with the transient populations, extreme distances, limited law enforcement, vulnerable women, lack of interagency, communication, and a culture that views sex workers and indigenous women as less urgent cases. When Robert Hansen was finally arrested, many Alaskans looked back at the pipeline era with new eyes and realized the truth that Hansen was not first and that he was a product of a system that was already failing women. Some of the women thought to be Hansen's victims may actually belong to the pipeline murders cluster instead, but without confessions or hard evidence, the lines between killers blur into one vast cold landscape of possibility. Unlike many serial killer cases, we don't know the killer's name, their face, their motive, their rituals, how many victims they claimed, whether they died quietly decades ago, or whether they left Alaska and continued killing elsewhere. What we do know is women disappeared, women were murdered, and someone got away with it, maybe more than one someone. The pipeline boom itself, bringing wealth and growth, came and went, but it left behind a legacy of violence that was frozen in time. It scattered across hundreds of miles of wilderness. Today, the pipeline murders sit at the intersection of history, tragedy, and mystery, and it's an unresolved chapter that still echoes across Alaska's highways, rivers, and memories. And that really kind of brings us to the final question. What does this story mean now, and what does it say about the dangers that arise when society fails its most vulnerable? The pipeline murders are not the story of a single man. They aren't the story of a monster who left a name, a signature, or a pattern clean enough for investigators to follow. They're a story of an era when Alaska was changing faster than the systems built to protect its people, an era where thousands of workers flooded into cities and camps, and predators found themselves in a land where oversight was thin, justice was scattered, and opportunity lay everywhere. What really makes this case so haunting is not just the brutality of the crime, it's the silence that followed them. This is silence from a system that was unable to keep up, silence from communities overwhelmed by economic upheaval, and silence from investigations buried in workload, distance, and weather, and silence from a society that didn't see these women as urgent cases or cases at all. Dozens of families waited months or years for answers that never came. Some still hold on to hope. Others have passed away without knowing what happened to their daughters, sisters, mothers, cousins, and friends. The killer or killers responsible for the pipeline murders likely walked away without consequence. Some may have left Alaska and continued elsewhere. Some may have died long before cold case detectives ever revisited the victims' names. And some may have gone on to raise families, build careers, or slip back into obscurity. That's really kind of where the cruelty of unsolved clusters like this is. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in history, masked by noise and chaos and protected by geography and distance. The victims deserve more than the anonymity the era gave them. They were not statistics. They were people who lived, laughed, worked, dreamed, loved, and hoped. Their lives were stolen in moments that reveal everything about the system that failed them, systems that in some ways still fail vulnerable women today. The pipeline murders sit at the crossroads of Alaskan history and American criminal justice. They do remind us that serial killers do not only rise from the ashes of trauma or psychological profile, they sometimes rise from opportunity, from blind spots, and from cultural indifference. So with that, I'm going to close the chapter on Alaska in our A to Z journey. We do so knowing that this story doesn't have an ending. It has a question mark, a shadow, and a cold wind that still blows across the Glen Highway and the Nick River Flats. It has a legacy that was carved in the snow and gravel roads that carried workers from north and victims south. The next time when I continue my A to Z trip across America, I'm going to move to the next state in the alphabetical case, which is a new case, a new killer, and a new corner of America with its own dark history. But Alaska will stay with us because some mysteries just don't fade. They linger on and they whisper. They remind us that justice delayed can be justice denied, and that the stories we tell matter, especially those who never had the chance to tell their own, which is exactly why I tell these stories. And that is the story of the Alaska pipeline murders.
Thank you, sir.
I found that one fascinating. I know that was long, and I'm really sorry. There was a lot to go through there. There's a lot of history, which, you know me, I'm a big old history nut. So, but I appreciate you sticking with me through that. I'm sure people took multiple potty breaks during there because it was long. But I'm enjoying this journey, going this A to Z. And like I said, I'd covered a couple of Alaska previously.
I started doing blocks a couple of years ago. They're awesome.
Doing blocks.
Yeah, blocks. You should do more blocks. Well, yeah. you got a while for this one. You're what, like the second state?
Yeah, I'm in the second state. I got a ways to go because we will hit through all 50 states.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the end of my story, and that will take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find more about us on nerderyandmurdery.com. That's our hub. That's our website for everything about us. You'll find pictures, you'll find links, and you will find the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often update.
Yeah, check this one out. You've got a lot of really great scenes of Rogue One. I like it.
Awesome. I appreciate all your work on that.
Well, thank you, sir.
You can also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing some merchandise for that. That's some free advertisement for us, and let's be honest about it. You look good in it.
That's right.
You can also find the link to our Patreon account or to our Patreon if you wish to become a patron and help with the costs that are associated with this show. This, along with the merchandise, do help us. There is costs that are associated with the upkeep, our storage, our uploads, our website, and everything that goes in associated with that. It's not cheap, it's not free, and we do appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
One thing you can do that is completely free for you, and it really helps us. It helps the algorithms find us and helps other people find the information that we talk about, is you can leave a 5-star review anywhere you can. Those really do increase our visibility, helps others find our topic that may be looking for the content that we talk about week in and week out that you so enjoy. So please do leave that review anywhere you can. I know we beg for that all the time, but I promise you, it helps the algorithms.
Oh, yeah. It helps us out a lot.
And last, but certainly not least, as always, to our good friend Chuck. Now you can go to sleep.
Good night, Chuck.
Good night, Chuck. With that,
I have been Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdering.
Cue the music.
Far but near to our hearts, where nerdery thrives and the mystery starts. They wield the mic like sabers of lore through the cosmos of fan.